New video this morning. The string of storms that spawned tornadoes in Texas moved east yesterday, causing another tornado to touch down, this time in New Orleans, while NBC affiliate WDSU was live on air. Look at this video. We know at least one person in Louisiana is dead. No word on exactly how many are injured this morning.
New numbers and a new map this morning. More than 3.5 million people have escaped Ukraine. This is according to the UN Refugee Agency. That's since Russia invaded 1 month ago on February 24th. And you can see from the map here that a majority of the refugees are going to Poland. So far, 2 million have been counted there so far. On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russian forces had captured people escaping Mariupol after agreeing on a humanitarian corridor. And this morning, a local ceasefire was agreed on for people fleeing Luhansk in eastern Ukraine.
And today, President Biden is heading to Europe for an urgent meeting now with the NATO allies.
The trip comes as Russia closes in on several cities in Ukraine. NBC's Bree Jackson is in Washington with what we can expect from the president's trip.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
President Biden traveling to Europe today as the war in Ukraine nears 1 month. The president warns with Vladimir Putin's back against the wall, out of desperation, the Russian president could turn to using chemical weapons.
We should be careful what's about to come. He knows there'll be severe consequences because of the united NATO front.
New drone video shows explosions in Mariupol, one of the hardest hit cities in Ukraine. In Kyiv, Ukrainians remain determined to fight off Russia's attacks. The mayor's brother, a former boxing champion, urges the West to do more.
We need to defend our sky, we need to defend our country, and we need military equipment.
U.S. defense officials estimate Russian forces have lost more than 10% of their combat power in Ukraine. The administration says resistance from Ukrainians and NATO has Russia depleted.
The Russian military has dramatically underperformed. The Russian economy has been rocked by powerful sanctions.
And more sanctions are expected to come during the NATO summit this week. President Volodymyr Zelensky will address world leaders there by video Thursday. In Ukraine, many under siege are holding on.
This is not the war between Ukraine and Russia. This is the war between light and darkness.
President Biden will deliver a message during his trip overseas that the U.S. is ready to support Ukraine and NATO allies for as long as it takes. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
During his trip to Europe this week, President Biden could announce plans to keep an increased number of U.S. troops in NATO countries near Ukraine permanently.
A few Russian billionaires with ties to Colorado could be sanctioned. Roman Abramovich is already being sanctioned by the UK, Canada, Australia, and the EU, but not yet by the United States. He is a billionaire who owns two multi-million-dollar condos, two properties or houses, I should say, in Snowmass. Pickens County leaders and community members are asking the federal government to investigate him. They are worried that the mansions could be sold and proceeds used to fund Putin's war efforts. Forbes also reports that another Russian billionaire, Evgeny Shvidler, has property in Snowmass.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's historic confirmation hearing continues today, now entering day 3. On Tuesday, Judge Jackson took questions from senators on issues including packing the court, sentencing in child porn cases, and the role of a public defender. If confirmed, Jackson would be the first black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court.
The United States has reached another COVID milestone. We have surpassed 80 million cases since tracking began several years ago. More than 978,000 people have died from COVID so far. Right now, the BA.2 Omicron subvariant accounts for about a third of the cases that they're seeing in the United States. However, health leaders say that overall infections are still going down. They're still declining from those highs in January. Now, this isn't to say that we're in the clear. After new COVID-19 cases rising dramatically in Europe, top healthcare leaders here say we could increase too.
They say what happens in Europe tends to play out here in the U.S. about 2 to 3 weeks later.
We can't just say we're done, now we're going to move on. We've got to be able to be flexible.
Dr. Fauci says the U.S. will likely see an uptick in cases, and there is a possibility of another variant in the future. FDA vaccine advisors will meet on April 6 to talk about adding more COVID-19 booster shots and about whether the vaccine could become an annual shot similar to flu shots.
This morning, a moment of reflection as we take a look at the memorial services held across the community yesterday, marking 1 year since the Boulder King Soopers shooting.
The Table Mesa store, as we had mentioned, was closed for the day yesterday. While no official memorial has been set up there, some people did make their way to the store to try and remember those who died. For many survivors, simply showing up was an act of courage.
The people I worked with were, like I mentioned, were a family, and forever will be. And so, even though I don't work at King Soopers anymore at the moment, I just wanted to be as close as I could be.
Yeah, that was Logan Smith. He was working inside the store at the Starbucks the day it happened. Survivors like Logan say that they are still working through the pain and the grief of that day, but they believe yesterday was an important day for them in the recovery process.
His actions in those last moments of his life live on today and will for many, many years.
Family, friends, officers, and community members flooded the Boulder Police Department on Tuesday in remembrance of Officer Eric Talley. The husband and father of 7 was the first officer on scene. Boulder's police chief says Talley's bravery saved dozens of lives that day. This week, President Biden signed a bill to rename the downtown Boulder post office after Eric Talley. In the days after the shooting, people raised $1.6 million for Community Foundation Boulder County's Crisis Fund. Nearly $300,000 of that was through Next Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. Now we're getting a better picture of how those donations were used. The Community Foundation says about $1 million went to families of the 10 people who were killed, the 28 people who were hurt, and the 300 others who were at the store when it happened. $250,000 went to mental health programs for survivors and community members. The foundation says about $145,000 went to grants for things like healing events and classes. The Museum of Boulder also received $160,000 to preserve the memorials created around the store and to fund other projects tied to the shooting.
And that museum is quite incredible, too. You made a good point yesterday, Gary, just about how long it takes for survivors for it to truly hit them. About 3 years, you said. And
that's what they're saying, yeah.
And I think that's where the museum's going to come into play of how we remember this tragedy.
Yeah.
And that healing garden.
And the healing garden and their mental health services available. These grants that you guys help fund, I mean, they're so important, you know, and in the long run, they're going to be so important, too.
They do a lot of good in the end in terms of helping people heal and grieve and move forward and process what happened that day.
Yeah, absolutely.